Well, there we go. And so you had a flavor for what Namepa was able to do back when we could see things, but we're still producing material, as I mentioned. And here we are. Oh my goodness, what a surprise. The Green for Sea initiative, where you can vote early and vote often. And Lynn has put the link to the Green for Sea in the chat. So please, as I said, you can vote every day. The other thing I wanted to mention, I hope that many of you were inspired by both the activity video, which recapped our activities in 2019 and 2020, but also getting to know Namepa, getting to know what is our area of activity, what have we been able to accomplish, and what we need to accomplish. And if you're not already a member of Namepa, we're going to put a link to the membership brochure into the video chat. So please, if you're not already a member of Namepa, please join us. We are really pleased to bring together industry in a fora like this. We bring together industry and regulators and conservation groups and educators and the public to save our seas. We also reach out to educate seafarers, port communities, and also our students. We're in many schools in North America. We work with after-school programs. Another area that is a passion project for us is we try to reach underserved communities, because what we've learned is that there are students that are in particularly urban areas that have no idea that there's a port there. They have no idea that they live near water. They have no idea what the implications are of those waterways and how it connects them to the rest of the world. Many years ago, Namepa hosted a World Maritime Day down in Linthicum, Maryland, and the Congressman Elijah Cummings was our opening keynote speaker. And what he said was incredibly profound. He said, if they can't see it, they can't dream it. So a lot of the work that Namepa does is to help underserved populations see the water, see the industry, so that they can dream of someday being a part of it. So if you haven't already joined us in our efforts, please do so. We have an engaged board of directors. Most of them are involved in this event today, and we are just very interested in growing our ranks so that we can leverage the potential of all of us joining together as a community to save our seas. Now, without any further ado, we're going to move into the second panel of our event today, and it is being led by Jan Hagen Andersen, who is the Business Development Director for DNV-GL, which, as we all know, is soon going to be DNV. Just as we got used to the full name, now they're going back to DNV. So Jan Hagen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Carleen. Yeah, I'm sorry for the name change and making everybody have to learn something new, but it's sort of a step to the old days, I guess. So hopefully it won't be too painful. Anyway, thanks so much to Carleen and the Namepa team for arranging this conference. It's a very interesting topics, and as always, very well arranged. And thanks to all the work with the Namepa team in the background, that is to make this a smooth seminar. I also wanted to hope that everyone in the Houston area, same as me, recovered well from the cold spell we had last week and has not, had any severe impacts because of that. We also have a very interesting panel discussion today. Our focus will be one of the other major disruptors for the maritime industry in the year to come, the decarbonization and the energy transition of our industry that we are just getting underway with. I will start with a little sort of setting the scene and background, and then go straight into our panelists that can dwell on this some more. So I think, first of all, we know that the decarbonization, next slide, please. I have a few slides there, so it's really where do we need to go. So please move forward with the slide. If that works. So yeah, so the decarbonization is definitely one of the really hot topics today for the maritime industry, and I think we're definitely at a tipping point. We know that the IMO has set their strategy and now also focus on the new short-term measure, the EEXI and the carbon intensity index, that is really going to have an impact on the existing vessels as well as the new vessels. So this is something that is definitely a new thing for most ship owners and operators to comply with. And I think it's the impact of this, even this regulation for 2023 is something the maritime community is just starting to wrap their heads around. The other is, of course, all the other entities and stakeholders, the EU with their Green Deal that might even have more stricter goals than the IMO. We also know that the financial institutions, through the Poseidon Principles and the charters, to the Sea Cargo Charter, is also something that is affecting the industry and the focus on decarbonization and reducing the CO2 emission from shipping. Other entities, regional initiatives like China, South Korea, and Japan has also declared ambitious plans for carbon neutrality. And we also know with the new administration here in the US, it also might be regional initiatives and focus from the new administration from the US and the North American side. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to quickly go through the MAPC, the outcome from the MAPC 75 and the proposed regulation that will be approved in June this year. So there's two regulations that will come in force from 2023. The one is the Energy Efficiency Existing Ship Index, basically the EEDI, now also applied to existing vessels, pre-EEDI vessels, and it's called the EEXI. And this, all ships need to comply with strict EEXI reduction rates by 2023. The other one is, of course, this operational carbon intensity reduction requirements, the carbon intensity index, that is basically a focus on reducing the CO2 emission from shipping year by year, stricter year by year from 2023, in order to meet a 40% goal of transport efficiency reduction by 2030. And this will lead to some big changes for the industry, and mandatory for each vessel, each cargo vessel and cruise ships from 2023 is that they need to show to the flag admin and the recognized organization that they have a compliant EEXI value for their vessel and an EEXI technical file on board the vessel. And this has to be verified through the classification survey before the end of 2023. The EEXI reduction rates is fairly much, it is agreed upon. There are some discussions on the calculation guidelines, but it's fairly mature already. On the carbon intensity index and where the ratings between A to E will end up is still under discussion and will be finalized in the next few months before the meeting in June at the MAPC 76. So again, this is focused on the short-term measures, on the EEXI, the carbon intensity index, and enhanced SEMP, but also looming in the horizon beyond that is more requirements on alternative fuel and how this will handle on a life cycle assessment of carbon emission and greenhouse gas emission from new fuels. Also on maybe the market-based measure, a price for CO2 in order to drive the industry from a financial perspective as well to implement these technologies. So there are several more regulations to follow. Next slide. So I think just to sum it up, where we're heading, the IMO greenhouse strategy is agreed. The EEXI and SEMP measures in 2023 are the first real regulation that impact the existing fleet. We do know that CO2 pricing and market-based measures is possible in the decade, in the middle of this decade and beyond, and toward 2030. And additional regulatory measures on greenhouse gas emissions are expected beyond 2030 to meet the strategy from the IMO. It's clear that in order to meet the ambitions, we need to develop and put in place carbon neutral fuel, low carbon fuels, but also improved efficiency technologies in order to reach the goals. It said the EU Green Deal may be driving even stronger regional focus on shipping greenhouse emission, and that again will of course affect operators worldwide. And there is also an issue about local particle matter emission and NOx emission is also on the EU agenda, maybe in the Mediterranean ECA that will come in the years to come. And again, other potential regulations on the horizon, biofouling, plastic, underwater noise, black carbon regulations are under development and under discussion at the IMO and other entities. And again, yeah, local regulations are coming at an increasing pace because, of course, many are still under the impression or believes that the IMO is simply not doing enough to reduce the greenhouse gas and environmental impact of shipping. So with that, I will turn it over to our panelists that can give us some more insight on the strategy and measures to move this decarbonization effort forward. So our first panelist is Krishna Ashuthandam from Shell Marine LNG, and he's business development team lead in the marine LNG business for Shell LNG market and trending, and he's been involved in this decarbonization effort and the LNG as a fuel business for many years. So take it away, Krishna, and look forward to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Jan. I hope everybody can hear me. I think, and thank you to NMEPA for the opportunity to talk a bit about a topic that's very close to my heart and something I'm very passionate about, decarbonization of the shipping sector. If somebody can please go over to the next slide. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the journey. I'm going to lay the context for decarbonization, and I have my other panelists who are going to talk about the different stages where I'm going to be focusing on what the future holds, so the journey ahead. Next slide, please. So what is the challenge, right? So limiting to the world emissions and the global temperature to 2 degrees Celsius requires a scale of this transition in energy that is quite massive. You know, we need to reduce that by about 70% from where it is today. For majority of that emissions, roughly 70% of that can be done through electrification or renewable energy. 30% are these hard to electrify sectors, of which shipping constitutes about 1/10 of that, so 3% of global emissions. As Jan mentioned, you know, the IMO has put out some ambitions in terms of the emission reduction that they would like to see of 50% by 2050 from a 2008 baseline. So the scale is enormous, yeah, and the pace is still unclear because there are so many fuels and technologies being considered to meet this ambition. You know, if you look at the diagram there or the picture there, it starts from green hydrogen all the way to bio LNG on the fuels side of things, and on the technology there are the energy efficiency technologies that are being implemented as we speak, and also future technologies like fuel cells to enable using future fuels like the green hydrogen, etc. From Shell's perspective, we believe the complexity of the shipping sector as well as the dynamics of the market the fuel of the future, based on that, the fuel of the future will be one that emerges in another sector most likely, and then will be shifted into the maritime space. Given that we believe green hydrogen holds a lot of attractiveness given its use in or its interest in across various sectors like power, heavy duty, etc. Additionally, it's also the base for a majority of these fuels that are being considered here, the synthetic fuels, including ammonia. Next slide, please. So we know the 2050, we know where we need to go, the destination is set, but it's not about what you do in 2050, it's what you do from now till then. It's the course that you have to plot. We believe to do that, we have to avoid emissions today using these technologies like energy efficiency, etc., to avoid as much emissions as we can. We have to reduce emissions by using low carbon, cleaner fuels today, like with the likes of LNG. And finally, when we aren't able to, the emissions that we aren't able to mitigate, we need to use or look to compensate them through carbon offsets and other credit accepted credit systems to make sure that we are reducing the emissions and the effect on the climate. What we cannot do is wait for the zero emissions fuel. Recently, Bill Gates mentioned the climate is like a bathtub filling up with water, and it can only hold so much. So what we need to do is we need to slow the flow of water till we find that wrench that can turn it off. Here's just a hypothetical example of how we can slow that. If we were to, again, this is not a scenario, it's just a hypothetical. If we were to build all new builds from now till 2035 on LNG instead of conventional fuel, we would save about 2.5 billion tons of CO2. That's roughly 2 years of emissions from the South American continent. Think about that. Next slide, please. So LNG can help slow this flow because it's readily available, it is affordable, and it meets the requirement of reducing the emissions immediately, right? So the LNG industry is a established industry on a conventional large scale side of things. And what it requires to get to the marine fuels is the last mile. And we have seen that in the past years, as you can see in the graph here, the growth of the last mile has been tremendous, and it continues to grow in a rapid pace. From an affordability perspective, the ship owners can expect a payback for their investment between 5 to 10 years, depending on the segment and the size of the vessel. And finally, and most importantly, it is acceptable from the fact that it reduces not only local emissions like SOx, NOx, and particulate matter, but also greenhouse gas emissions of up to 21%. At Shell, we're really proud that we have, we're able to say that we have the largest and the widest or broadest network of LNG bunkering. We have 6 bunker vessels on water today, and we can provide LNG in 3 continents, between Singapore all the way down to Savannah through Europe, and also fortunate enough to have been part of many firsts. Next slide, please. So not only does LNG help reduce emissions today, but it also starts being the pathway, the first step of the pathway to decarbonization. It provides the industry with multiple options in the future to decarbonize further. You could go, from the likes of bio LNG as a drop-in fuel to further decarbonize, to working with fuel cells, which we think is a key technology, and unlocking the future fuels such as green hydrogen. So it really is paving the way to further decarbonize while meeting the objective of slowing the flow into the bathtub. Last slide, please. I just want to end with this. It's none of this is being, not one company or one industry or one part of the industry can make this happen. It has to be done together, and collaboration is really key. And I look to the likes of the folks on the call and NAMEPA and others who bring all of us together to try and make this work. But it is, if there's one thing I would leave you with, is the point that inaction is not an option. It's something we need to work on today, and we need to do it together. Jan, I'm going to turn it back to you, but I'm happy to take questions at the end.
Yes, thank you so much, Krishna. Yes, let's wait with questions towards the end. I saw there are some with their hands up, but I think we'll wait with the question. Yeah, thanks, Krishna. And I think it's really starting with the short term, using the fuels that are and technologies that are available is a key to start the transition already for the industry. Our next speaker in the panel is Mr. Jason Kelly, Executive Vice President from Moran Shipping Agencies, and he will focus on medium-term measures that might help the industry to make the transition and avoid too much disruption. So, Jason, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for NAMEPA to have me today. Moran's been a member for a handful of years, and we really appreciate the leadership that NAMEPA has shown in this space. Next slide, please. Hi, next slide, please. Looks like the slide is moving very slowly. There we go. Thank you. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about where do we need to go through the lens of NAMEPA, and in a larger context of course, in decarbonization, but also looking at the larger context of change and innovation. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about myself. This year is my 27th year at Moran Shipping Agencies. We are, by agency standards, a large company. We do about 20,000 port movements a year in the United States. My background is in the digital side, and also I've been very involved in looking at diversifying Moran and looking at innovation. We went back to the first again, but we have several divisions. We have a maritime security company. We have a maritime cybersecurity company. We work oil and gas and safety and pollution. We have a data services program, and we have new ventures, most recently in offshore wind. Next slide, please. So, I thought it would be good maybe to take out our crystal ball and before we looked at, really where do we need to go, what might things look like in the shipping sector? Next slide, please, in 2030. And I think, sadly, many of shipping's intractable problems will still be around. Of course, the focus here is decarbonization, SOx, NOx, but, again, through the NAMEPA lens, ship strikes and noise pollution, invasive species with ballast water anti-fouling, cybersecurity, physical security, marine waste plastics, regulatory, workforce changes, and what else might we see? No one could have predicted the pandemic. Next slide, please. And, coming back to the future and maybe looking into the past, I think in shipping, we've seen a lot of change. History buffs will talk about the sextant and the compass and the accurate marine chronometer. And then, moving forward, we had, the steamship, we had the container, and even within my lifetime, the fax machine, really, incredibly changed parts of the supply chain piece of what I do. But I think that, innovation and disruption has really changed. Deloitte did a great futurist piece where they talked about that you really no longer could react to innovation to innovate. You needed to be anticipating innovation. And I think that's really key when we take a look at some of these intractable problems. Next slide, please. All right, next slide, please.
Your presentation seems to be particularly dense, Jason, for some reason, so it's taking time to load.
Yeah, that's okay. So so can we go back a slide, please? Right. So, really what's changed about innovation is just how quickly things have changed. And if you look at some of the emerging technologies, blockchain, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, machine learning, big data, marine acoustics, advanced materials, and robotics, many of these are all revolutionizing our industry now. They'll change the industry moving forward. And they all apply to these intractable problems discussed, carbon emissions and beyond. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick anecdote. A Mass Maritime intern brought this slide into me about 4 years ago and said, "Isn't this absolutely fantastic? The death of the middleman." And I said, "Well, no, it's not. We're the middleman at Moran Shipping." So I think when we look forward, the ship owners can take solace in the fact that at least they don't need to worry about still being around. Many of us are highly being disrupted through innovation and through tech disruption. Next, please. So, and again, what other companies might be, impacted by this, about this change, I think is a really important topic for many of we stakeholders in the industry. Next slide, please. So, really, where do we need to go? And, I believe that what we need to do is we need to look at a new paradigm called open innovation. If you look at some of the most innovative companies in the world, Google and Facebook and Amazon, with all of the millions of dollars that they spend on talent, they're finding their greatest innovations looking externally. So that in essence is what open innovation is. It's not only looking within, but looking outward. And how do we do that to openly innovate? We look towards universities. I think academia has been a great source of that, and there are some tremendous programs going on right now in decarb with some universities here in the United States and in Europe. I think that looking at research institutions in particular are important. Even open innovation by looking for external experts is something that we really need to do. It's about combining internal and external resources to boost a company's innovation culture. Next slide, please. And here are some open innovation examples that are quite interesting. I know that the open platforms that Apple uses, High Tech Campus by Philips, hackathons by Facebook. I think these are the type of methods that we need to deploy and employ when we're looking at decarb and when we're looking at, again, some of the other really important spaces that NMEPA is trying to speak to. Next slide, please. So, really, what does the data show us as the best roadmap to innovation? Next slide, please. And really, the data show that startup communities and cluster communities, innovation incubators, accelerators, this is really where we are finding the solutions to the problems that we have. And this map shows some of the really most exciting ones that are happening globally right now. And many of you know that several of them are focused in the maritime space. The dock in Israel is a funder. Port Excel in Rotterdam is maritime based. Catapult Ocean in Norway is another one, which is really provided some interesting technology on the decarb side. Maritime Blue in the Northwest here in the United States. I'm part of a startup that's working through the TechStars program in Singapore on the maritime side. These communities are absolutely, rich with solutions to the problems that we're trying to address here in the maritime sector. Next slide, please. So the one that I know the best is See Ahead. I'm the co-founder and have the privilege of being board chair to See Ahead, which is a blue tech innovation venture platform in Boston. And we currently right now have 5 or 6 really interesting startups that are tackling the decarb problem. Some of them in new fuels and some of them in efficiencies, digital efficiencies. So many of you know Matt Morgan from Freight Flows, and his startup does predictive analysis, which allows for huge amounts of bunker fuel savings, due to the type of information that his startup provides decision makers. Next slide, please. So, right now we are tracking about 706 startups globally. Before the pandemic, we had about 150 walk through our doors in downtown Boston. But, these clusters, these innovation, platforms, are bringing in legacy companies alike. And there's tremendous things that are happening when a company like DNV and Shell, my esteemed colleagues here, are really active participants in global accelerators and in innovation. And I think that that's something that we really need to do more of. It's a direction that we need to go for 2030. Next slide, please. At See Ahead, we have an open innovation platform. We have several startup members. We do innovation challenges. We have, heavy involvement from, tier 1 private sector companies that sponsor different joint innovation task force. We run an incubator. We have our first cohort right now. There are 6 companies that are there. 2 of those are tackling decarb issues. And then finally, we have a capital side. Of course, it's so important to have capital in this space. We have an angel network. We have a venture studio, and we're deploying capital. We just put $250,000 just 2 weeks ago in a really interesting startup that again will tackle some of ocean sustainability's most important issues. Next slide, please. Just some of the startups that we have in that space. And again, it's just not about my company, See Ahead. It's about all of these innovation platforms that we see globally that I think are really important and that we really need to focus on over the next 10 years as we move to the challenges of 2030. Next slide, please. A big part of what makes these clusters work is geographic synergies. And so, up in the Northeast, I thought it would be interesting to, throw this slide up here, which shows really a robust ecosystem of innovation and experts to help tackle the problems that we're trying to face. Next slide, please. So this, I feel really bad that DNV isn't on here, especially since Jan is, I just didn't have enough room. But I think, we in the global maritime industry have done a great job with innovating among ourselves. But again, that looking externally, that open innovation externally, I think is something that we need really to work on together over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So, what I'd like to see, where I really think that we need to go, is that we need to create a maritime sector open innovation ethos. I'm tired of getting a bad rap, from shipping and saying how we resist change. I think we've done a good job on many fronts to innovate, but I think we need to take it to the next. I think we need to take it to the next level. I want when people when they discuss innovative industries, it not just be about telecommunications or biotech or, aerospace. I'd like to see the maritime sector to be at the top of the list. And if we can do that, if we can come together and openly innovate, looking externally, working, I think, primarily in the startup communities and in these cluster organizations, I think that the sky is the limit. Next slide, please. And that's all I have. I went over, Carlene, the last time, so I promised you I'd do a little bit better this time. I look forward to any questions that people have, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Jason. That was very interesting, and I think a key, as you say, innovation, collaboration, and access to funding is key. And yeah, DNVGL is also involved in many of these clusters and helping them facilitate the innovation and new technologies that are needed. Our last panelist is Mada McLean from the Zero Emission CESTA. And I think that's, again, she will talk about some of the technologies that is already available for zero emission shipping and how we can scale them up in order to make them really coming alive to meet the requirements for decarbonization of shipping. So Mada, please do your presentation.
Thank you, Jan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks to NMEPA for this opportunity to speak today and to the previous speakers for your insightful presentations. I would ask you, the presenters, to move to slide 1. Thank you. I'm going to show my age here, but the first thing I'd like to say is the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. But first of all, I'd like to introduce the Zero Emission Ship Technology Association. We are a pure trade association founded in March of 2019. We represent original equipment manufacturers and companies within the shipping industry whose technologies and solutions are zero emissions at point of use on a ship and have minimal upstream greenhouse gas impacts. Our association considers greenhouse gas impacts and not just carbon. For example, we need to consider the impacts of methane, which over 20 years has 80 times the impact of carbon on climate. And when considering ammonia, we must look at nitrous oxide impacts, which has 300 times the impact of carbon on climate. Next slide, please. Our members operate in 17 countries across the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Our fast-growing organization represents a wide spectrum of services and technologies required to make zero emissions shipping a reality. From marine batteries, wind propulsion, ship design, ship owners, electrical charging systems, energy storage, as well as the full hydrogen supply chain, from hydrogen producers, system integrators, hydrogen safety, and marinized hydrogen fuel cell manufacturers. Next slide, please. We're beginning to see a rapid uptake of these technologies in the market, in spite of the lack of a regulatory framework that would incentivize or require it. Many of these are government-funded projects. However, sometimes it just makes economic sense, as is the case with many electrical ferry projects. Our members are working across the spectrum of maritime markets. Projects include everything from retrofitting vessels with wind propulsion or hydrogen fuel cells to increasing the battery capacity and replacing direct drive with electric drivetrains. We also have several members working with maritime energy supply chains, containerized green hydrogen for inland waterways and short sea shipping, renewable energy-based electrical storage and charging systems, as well as a company working in marine renewable-based offshore hydrogen production. The list of projects is increasing every day, but what makes our association unique is we're only looking at true zero vessels, true zero GHG life cycle fuels, and the economic cases that support true zero. Next slide, please. I'd like to give you some examples of what can be achieved today and what technology we have today. The Zero Emission Ship Technology Association presented on our technologies at the IMO Intersessional Working Group on Greenhouse Gases 6. Our technology providers who presented that day showed that a vessel could cross the Atlantic with absolutely zero greenhouse gas emissions with their market-ready technologies available today. The ship's propulsion system is a combination of hydrogen fuel cells, batteries, and wind. The batteries are recharged during the voyage when she is under wind, using a trail propeller to bring energy into the ship's system. With smart energy systems and intelligent, efficient ship design, we can drastically reduce the amount of energy required to be stored on the vessel, translating to less fuel bunkered, less fuel in the bottom line. Next slide, please. These are examples of technologies required for zero emissions vessels. As you can see, they're all between TRL 8 and 9. TRL is technology readiness level. So I don't have time today to go into these technologies or how they would be used in ship design, but I'm happy to discuss during the Q&A or for you to contact me directly. Next slide, please. So if this technology is market ready, why are we not seeing more zero emission vessels coming onto the market? It's no secret that there is a need for clear, unambiguous, and ambitious targets that focus on an outcome of zero emissions. If the goal, zero emissions, is clear, the optimal solutions for each sector, subsector will be brought to the fore by market dynamics and level the playing field in the process. For the sector to achieve zero, we need regulators to establish rules, codes, and standards for all possible zero emission fuels and technologies in collaboration with CLAS. This will enable ship owners to gain access to financing and act without worrying about stranded assets. Next slide, please. The Zero Emission Ship Technology Association represents a beacon to zero. We have the technology to achieve true zero today, but not everybody can get there right now due to economics and a lack of clear regulations. Although our focus is zero emissions, we understand it's a process. This is a journey, and we want to work hand in hand with industry along that journey, because at the end of the day, it's about creating that balance. The more zero emission technologies we put on ships, the more zero emission vessels we have on the water, the sooner the sector achieves net zero overall. So just to round off, the Zero Emission Ship Technology Association supports the IMO regulatory framework and will inform IMO delegates with expert information about our technologies, innovations, and zero greenhouse gas emissions fuels. We are coordinating dissemination and flow of information between regulators, innovators, local and regional policymakers. And on that note, we are organizing a 3-day workshop type event to coincide with COP26 this November in Glasgow, bringing together industry stakeholders and policymakers to discuss innovative solutions, lessons learned, best practices, and how together we can achieve true zero. Please do contact me if you would like to be involved. To sum up my message, the future is zero. We have the technology to achieve zero today, but we require a regulatory framework to level the playing field for all stakeholders engaged in or impacted by the industry before we will see these technologies take center stage. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mada. So I think we might have time for some Q&A, Colleen, but let me know how much time we have. I see we have one hand raised up. So Panos Pipos, did you have a question for the panel?
Not hearing it.
No. Okay. I see Regan Nelson has his hand up. So any question from the panel, or people can also leave a question in the chat if need to be.
Hi, yes. My name is Reagan Nelson, NRDC. Thank you so much for organizing this panel. It's really exciting to think about what's coming down the pipeline. One question I have is this previewed in one of the first presentations. Regulations around underwater noise pollution is something that many of us are kind of keeping our eye on, as underwater noise pollution is significantly harmful to marine life throughout the global ocean basin. I'm curious, particularly for Maddie, as we look at the technologies that we need to employ to get to zero emissions, what's the opportunity and or really the need for us to be thinking about the technologies needed to lessen underwater noise pollution in tandem with the technologies to get us to zero emissions? Can you or any of the other panelists reflect on that challenge and what we might need to do today to make sure that we're not creating zero emission noisy ships in the future?
Thank you, Reagan. I'll jump in on that quick. I think that this is really important. I think that Canada's actually done a study making connections between zero emissions technologies and the reduction of underwater noise. I think that as soon as we have an electric drivetrain, immediately we see a reduction in underwater noise. And also, for example, hydrogen fuel cells, well, both hydrogen fuel cells and batteries, and of course, wind propulsion present no noise whatsoever in operation. And so I think that these two concepts work very well in tandem, reducing emissions and reducing noise if, as we say, we choose the right technology. But a true zero is indeed requires electric drivetrains and therefore drastic noise reduction.
One question I have for the panel is that it's been estimated, and I'm sure it's a low estimate, that it's going to cost $1.4 trillion for the industry to really decarbonize. How is that going to get funded? Is it going to be a series of startups, similar to what Jason's working with? Is it going to be that LNG to green transition that we heard about earlier from Krishna, or is it going to be the zero emission total that Maddie is suggesting?
I'm going to jump in really quick, and I think that Jason will follow up on this. But when people use the term cost, I see opportunity, and I think that this is the way this is an investment opportunity, and I'm also working myself in hydrogen supply, and I think this is a huge investment opportunity. Whenever there's a shift, there's an opportunity for investment, and I'm just going to let Jason follow on because I think that he's probably better apt to speak about the investment opportunity than myself.
Well, I think we've seen some initiatives from the international shipping community to create research and development funds. None of those have been finalized yet, but there's one that BIMCO and Intertanko and other stakeholders are looking at that would put $10 billion, I think, into research and development, over the next, 5 years. But I absolutely, agree with that point as being, so salient. I believe that, while we do have, these challenges, there are huge commercial opportunities, not only for the startups that are coming up with these, really exciting solutions, but for the legacy company partners that they need to find their path. So I agree. I think there's an opportunity there, and and again, I feel that nonlinear thinking and looking beyond our industry and looking even beyond traditional partners in the startup community with these emerging tech is the way that we're going to see the best results.
Krishna, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, Caroline. So this is the $1 trillion question. Yeah.
1.4 trillion.
Well, so I mean that number really depends on what ends. So the view we have is there are, it's not one number, right? It's how do you get to zero emissions with the lowest cost to society. Because end of the day, however we get there, society is going to pay for it one way or the other, right? If it's through governments, if it's through companies or investment opportunities like Maddie and Jason mentioned, or if it is through other means, the society in the end will have to pay for it. So how do you get there? I think it's going to be all of these options. I think government and regulations will play a key role in ensuring the speed and the scale of the transition. Also, if you look at shipping, as Jason mentioned, it would be great to shift the dynamic. But what we are trying to do, or what this is, IMO 2020 is going to be a walk in the park compared to this, right? This is a dynamic shift in the mindset of the shipping industry, right? So I think that is going to be something that is needed to get there soon. And we need to do that together, right?
Wonderful. Thank you all for your cogent comments and your elucidation of this area, because we really are, I think the entire industry is searching for a pathway to get there. And I think you've really presented wonderful opportunities for us to move forward in this regard. And also thank you to Jan Hagen for his able and wonderfully illustrative moderating. So thank you all.